So our story today is this whole idea of polyamory. And for those of you who are blessedly unaware of what polyamory is, it's not quite the same thing as polygamy. Polyamory is basically three or more people that are in a sexual relationship, and they're pushing for formal government recognition of their relationships. Now, this has kind of been around for a while. It really is just sort of formalized hedonism. These relationships are as fluid as water, as you might imagine. They have different terms that they like to use, like thruples or quads, and there's been these human interest stories in the Canadian press examining. There was a UBC professor, I believe, was one of them, who talked about the fact that she was in a relationship like this. The term itself is pretty recent. It's polyamory was coined around the 1990s, but again, with the redefinition of marriage, with the introduction of gender ideology, what we have now is a lot of polyamorists who are pushing for the government to recognize their relationships because they want tax kickbacks. And again, I think more fundamentally, because they want the normalization and they want formal social recognition of their relationships, because deep down they know that their relationships are perverse, their relationships are not healthy, and they need other people to tell them that they're healthy to quiet those tiny doubts their consciences keep on whispering in their ears. And I'm not kidding when I say there's been a real wave of propaganda. Not just in Canada, but both sides of the Atlantic. I wrote a column on this for the European Conservative when I was working out of Brussels earlier this year. The Brussels Times was covering stories of various European hedonists who were engaging in this sort of thing. The New York Times published a review of Molly Rodden-Winter's Open Marriage memoir titled How a Polyamorous Mom Had a Big Sexual Adventure and Found Herself. Short version is she found herself in bed with other people. The New Yorker published an essay titled How Did Polyamory Become So Popular on Christmas Day of all times. And Time magazine published an essay titled Polyamory Isn't Just for Liberals, which began this way, and this is really rich, so I wanted to quote it in full. Polyamory seems to have burst upon the American mainstream over the past 2 decades. The deluge of podcasts, TV shows, books, and magazine articles detailing polycules, metamors, thruples, threesomes, and moresomes testifies to the growing number of Americans willing to jettison monogamy. Now, it's always kind of like grimly humorous to see the press breathlessly reporting on their own interest in something, right? It's basically like there has been an increased media interest in polyamory. The interested media reports polyamorously. It's ridiculous because they're the ones stoking the interest by publishing these reviews and doing these podcasts. Editorial boards and reporters decide what goes in the newspaper, right? The New York Times is an incredibly influential publication. It also has a limited amount of space. And so with everything going on in the world, like the New York Times slogan is all the news that's fit to print. So when they decide that a threesome or a moresome or whatever is fit to print, they're making a decision that this is in the public interest and that people should be reading about this. So essentially, this is a circular thing where the media is saying there's more media interest in this, said the media interestedly. It's really ridiculous. And presumably they know why they've decided to dedicate so many resources to this. And it's because the media has been serving as the propaganda arm of the sexual revolution now for half a century. And polyamory is, based on what we've been reading lately, obviously the new stage, and which is why all of these articles include interested questions about when will the state begin to address these things? When will the state begin to recognize these relationships? I think the most forthright contribution comes from New York Magazine. Again, very prestigious publication, very limited glossy page count, that has decided not only that polyamory is a subject everybody should know about, but they actually put it on their cover. The cover story was titled Polyamory, a Practical Guide for the Curious Couple. And the issue's cover features a photo of 4 cats clutching at each other that is better left uncommented on. Now, so you've got the Canadian press, the American press, and the European press, and most of the most high-profile publications covering this issue. So Canadians will no doubt be very unsurprised to discover that Trudeau's Liberal government is now in on the game as well. But I do think you might be shocked to find out how much it cost. According to a really good report by Cosmin Deserza, I'm sorry, Cosmin, if I mispronounced your name, at True North, a Quebec study titled, quote, Children's Views on the Romantic Partners of Their Polyamorous Parents in the Journal of Social and Personal Relationships was funded by a federal grant, which means taxpayers funded it, for a cool $70,000, $70,662 to be exact. And this study, unsurprisingly, said that children being exposed to polyamory, as in one or more of their parents sleeping with one or more other people, was healthy and positive for their development. According to the report, researchers interviewed 18 children between the ages of 15 and 16 years old. 3 of the children in the cohort lived in households with their parents' multiple sexual partners. 9 of the 10 households interviewed included adults who identified as LGBTQ+. Very unsurprising. According to the study, and try to listen to this with a straight face, I challenge you. According to polyamory practicing parents, exposing their children to polyamory teaches them to develop healthy, positive, and I'm losing my own contest, healthy, positive, and respectful interpersonal relationships based on honest communication and transparency. As previously mentioned, most participating children mentioned more than one romantic partners in their lives. Now, I could have told you for free that parents who sleep around would justify it by saying it's good for the kids. You wouldn't have needed to pay $70,000 to find out that parents who are messing around and engaging in all kinds of alternative sexual relationships are saying, this is really good for the kids, actually. This, of course, utterly ignores decades of research emphasizing over and over again the advantages of the natural family, of children growing up with their mother and their father rather than the parent and whoever that parent happens to be sleeping with at the moment. But the researchers credulously report that the kids thought their parents' flavor of the month was someone who expanded their circle of friends, friends with benefits presumably, or someone who contributed to their material well-being. Here's how True North summarized this report. And again, try to do the straight face thing again. For example, 9-year-old Aiden said he was able to create a special bond with one of his mother's romantic partners because he introduced him to a new hobby, which he now enjoyed doing with him. One of the things that's cool about him is that he's the one who showed me how to do magic, the researchers wrote. One of the reasons cited as a benefit included that polyamorous partners gave kids access to various material resources like pools and gifts. I don't know why anybody would want their real dad if they could have a gift or a pool. Romantic partners were described by the children as contributing to their material comfort by buying them things, this is known as a bribe, or sharing their possessions with them, researchers wrote. For instance, 12-year-old Margot felt closer to her mother's girlfriend than to her mother's boyfriend. According to her, the fact that her mother's girlfriend was younger than her mother's boyfriend and the fact that she was of the same gender as her meant that the two of them quickly found things in common. That is a quote-unquote from the study. That is unbelievably creepy, but what is there really to say about this sort of thing? In other words, there's a very expensive exercise in listening to promiscuous adults justify their lifestyle. Yes, I have a boyfriend and a girlfriend. We're a metamor or a throuple or a quad, and my kids love it because sometimes the guy that I'm sleeping with, when I'm not sleeping with the girl I'm sleeping with, the girl that I'm sleeping with is actually busy hanging out with my kid because she's so much younger. But my boyfriend teaches my son magic tricks. If that doesn't disturb you, I don't really know how to help you. But this study was funded by the Trudeau government, and the study concluded this, quote, ultimately, the presence of several loving and caring adults in the lives of their children is perceived by polyamorous parents as beneficial for the emotional, social, and intellectual development of their children, end quote. So the key takeaway here, buried in the middle of that sentence there, perceived by the parents. Perceived by the parents. In other words, parents who sleep around think it's good for their kids that they're sleeping around because, as everybody knows, the one thing that 12-year-old girls and 14-year-old boys really want is to know that their parents are being sexually fulfilled with multiple people, sometimes all under the same roof and sometimes all at the same time. We paid $70,000 for that little nugget. And this is just, again, an attempt to justify the sexual revolution, and it's an attempt by the press and politicians and academics and to collectively pretend that kids would rather have access to a pool or magic tricks or presents than a stable family home that doesn't revolve around their parents' weird libidos and fetishes. It's a sick joke, and we're actually paying for it. At the end of the day, the primary victims of the sexual revolution are kids, and we just paid $70,000 to listen to promiscuous adults drone on about their weird relationships and have them tell us that it's really good. It's really good for the kids. It's really good for the kids to grow up in unrelated households with adults that they are not biologically connected to, but may or may not be sleeping with one of their parents or their parents' boyfriend or girlfriend. This stuff is just ridiculous. And again, it kind of showcases how radical the Trudeau government actually is. And back to our first story, it highlights the fact that there is an incredible amount of common sense area that the Conservatives could actually stake out. This is the kind of government we've got, guys. This is the kind of government we've got. Thanks everyone for watching that clip. If you'd like to check out our content on other platforms, you can find us on Rumble, Spotify, iTunes, or wherever else you get your content. Be sure to like and subscribe to this channel and spread the clip around if you like the content. Thanks so much.